Disney is about to change their FastPass system yet again with a brand new name. But the problem with the system is it is far too cheap. Okay, listen, I can hear the keywords going already in the comments. Before you come at me and say it is not too cheap, it is really expensive, let me explain what I mean. Now, if you cast your mind back, 1999, Disney introduced FastPass. Now, this was a complimentary service. There were kiosks around the park at all the major attractions, and you could go up to one of these, put your ticket in, and you would receive a paper ticket with a return time. Now, it was wildly popular. It had some limitations. You had to physically go to these attractions to get a ticket, and that kind of kept it at reasonable levels. Now, that original FastPass system, it did have some limitations. Initially, you could get another FastPass whilst you were in the window of the previous one. They then started adding that, or you can get one after 2 hours. Sounds kind of familiar with the system we have today. So, you know, if you played the system right, you ran around the park a lot, you could stack these things up, but that was the thing. You had to physically go to all these kiosks. They then replaced this with FastPass Plus. Now, the big difference here was that this was geared towards planners, right? Now, there are some people who plan their holiday to within an inch of their life. I'm not one of those people. I like to just rock up, I don't know what I want to do tomorrow, let alone in 30, 60, 90 days time. But this was the system where you could pre-book these fast passes, up to 3 per day. So basically, by the time you got to the park, most of the good ones were already gone, right? So that came with its own challenges. And the problem you had with FastPass Plus, on the flip side of this, was it's great that you can plan all this stuff, but then it felt like you had to plan stuff. Because if you didn't get in there 60 days, 30 days in advance, on the day there'd be very little left. And obviously that was an advantage of staying on site. You know, it's one of the perks that's gone away now, that if you were on site, you got that early access. Now, the new system they're talking about, they're bringing something back. I think it's 3 days for non-resort guests and 7 for resort guests. But that, again, that just puts the pressure on planning everything up front. And as I say, I don't know what I want to do tomorrow, let alone 30 days, 60 days, 90 days in the future. I didn't like when I went in 2022 and I had to plan which parks I was going to well in advance. I'm glad they've scrapped that. You know, yes, there are people that love to plan, but there's also spontaneous visitors that just want, oh, I fancy a Magic Kingdom day today, or I fancy a Hollywood Studios day today. And, you know, they still need to have that capacity. They did put some changes in. They started introducing this tier level, again, similar to what we have in the current system. They had tier 1 where you could only get 1 of those, and then tier 2 where you would get 2. So when you booked your 3 per day, maximum you could get one of these kind of like A-list kind of attractions, which, as I say, today that's those individual lightning lanes. But it became a system that favored the planners and then did not work very well for spontaneous visitors. You then fast forward, and then in the pandemic, things slightly changed. Now, just before the pandemic, Disney announced Genie. Now, this was pitched as a kind of a planning service that would take care of everything for you, and it would tell you what fast passes and recommend them and all that. Most of you probably use Genie Plus, and indeed the free Genie, and that's not what we ended up getting. Now, thanks to the pandemic, they kind of decided we can change a lot of stuff. And then they introduced the paid Genie Plus service. Now, the reason most people say this is really expensive is because they're comparing it to what came before, a complimentary service that, you know, Disney used to offer. So now, instead of it being free, you're paying $25 per person per day. So I understand why people think that is expensive. Now, Genie Plus gets a lot of criticism. And as I say, I have used it. I used it 3 years ago and I used it this year. It's 2 years ago, sorry, not 3 years ago. You have to study it, right? That is the biggest problem with Genie Plus, is that it's not a service that you can just turn up on the day with no knowledge of it and go, oh, they've got a FastPass system, I'll just pay for that and use it. You can try, but you will get very few rides if you don't understand how to play the system. It is ridiculously complicated. And when I used it at the start of this year, if you take a look at the vlog when I was in Magic Kingdom, which I'll probably put up here, perfect. Used Genie Plus, got on tons and tons of rides. Very, very great tool in that park. A few days later, I went to Hollywood Studios, I'll put that video up there. It was the exact opposite, because the problem with it is that you need to snag that one ride. In this case, it was Slinky Dog. I snagged Slinky Dog first thing, but I didn't get return time till something stupid like 4:30 in the afternoon. And then I've got 2 hours where I can't do anything. I can't get another lightning lane. So the system is hugely flawed. And I think that's one thing that they will solve by putting in this kind of pre-planning thing. But again, not everybody plans, not everybody likes to plan, people like to be spontaneous, so I don't think that is necessarily the solution. It feels like they have just combined all the old systems and went, ta-da, here's this new thing. The new system we don't know the price for, but I suspect it's going to be very similar to Genie Plus. The thing is, the way that any skip the line service works is that ultimately you've got multiple lines into an attraction. You've got your standby line, you've got potentially a single rider line, you'll have a ride access line, and then you will have this fast track Genie Plus, whatever they want to call it. At some point they're all going to join, and a cast member has to then sort of say, right, you go, you go, you go, etc. The problem with that is they're heavily incentivized, obviously, to prioritize these fast track queues. That's the whole point, right? These people have paid for a fast experience, so they should go on first. Well, what that does is, and from what I've heard, the ratio that Disney uses in some cases is 50 FastPass to single standby line, which is ridiculous. And so that is why you will see that the standby lines just get longer. Now, there are some parks around the world, if you look at Europa Park, for example, they don't have any fast track at all. They just have standby queues. Now that, coupled with German efficiency, those queues shift. They are really, really good. The problem you've got with Genie Plus, and I suspect with the new system when it comes in, I've used it because for me living in the UK, when I get to America, I want to do everything, right? I'm not there very often, so I want to get on everything. And so I kind of feel obliged to take that fast track and maximize my experience. You turn up at a park, you see queue times that are up at like 90 minutes an hour and like 2 hours, 3 hours, all that kind of stuff. You immediately think, well, I don't want to stand in that queue. And then you see a FastPass system, which is $25. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's very accessible to a lot of people. So then a lot of people go, well, I'm going to get Genie Plus. And then that means that the fast track queue gets really busy. And when the fast track queue gets really busy, the main queue gets even slower. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. So the reason I'm saying that this is too cheap is that it's far too accessible to the masses. When I was there at the start of the year, almost everybody in the queue was talking about, right, I need to book the next lightning lane, I need to... Most people had it. Now, obviously they will have limits on this, they're not going to sell it to everybody because that completely defeats the purpose, but there were so many people using the service that it significantly impacts the general public in the main queue. You take a look at the opposite, you look at something like Universal, who obviously have a fast track system, but they've gone to the other end. They are $150, $200 per person per day. Now I have used that service as well, but I only used it because I stayed in one of their kind of premier hotels and it's included. When I went recently at the start of this year, I didn't have that and there was no way I was paying that fee. So when you have a system that is that expensive, there'll be some people that don't care. Don't bat an eyelid, they'll pay it, they'll use it, that's fine. They get that experience where they can walk straight on. But it keeps it minimal. There's then less people in that fast track queue and more people just going through the main queue. And the main queue, then there's none of this kind of merge points and things just move far, far smoother. There's a lot of things going on with different fast track systems. So, you know, there is this system, there is the Universal system, there is the no fast track at all system. And I would love to hear what you think, what you prefer, which system you think is the best one in the comments down below. If you are enjoying this, make sure you give it a thumbs up and do consider subscribing. And yeah, let's keep going. Now comes no surprise when you look back at all the various systems that we've had in the past. I did put up a poll and I asked you guys, which system should they bring back? You know, should they stick with what they have? Should they go back to one of the old systems? Should they adopt Universal system and just go for the expensive ticket that few people use, but it's there if you want it? And then again, the queues just move really fast. And it's no surprise that the majority of you preferred the original system, the one that was kind of, you could do it on the day, it was free, it was complimentary, there was no complexities to it other than you had to kind of run around the park to get all these tickets. People enjoyed it, people found it useful. You know, you're at that, right, oh, it's fine, I'll get a ticket, I'll come back in an hour's time, that's cool, I'll go and grab something to eat. Like, it makes more sense. But, you know, it's funny actually, if you haven't already, there's a video by Mickey Views, which I'll put a link in the description. He does a really, really in-depth job explaining all the old systems. And ultimately, as he says, the reason that we've got the system now is because the executives couldn't tell how much money people were spending. Yes, the fast track system benefited people, but it didn't have a cost. And at the end of the day nowadays, you know, corporate America and all that, all they want to know is how many dollars, how many cents somebody's spending in the park. So now they have this system that you pay dollars and cents to use. Makes sense. Different sense. At the end of the day, Disney doesn't want you standing in a queue any more than you want to be standing in a queue, because they want you either buying food or buying merchandise. So they're going to want a system that allows you to turn up later and just walk straight on a ride. And that's probably why they've made this so kind of accessible from a price point of view. But really, at the end of the day, as I said, the system is far too cheap.